Hi, I'm Steve Sapato, and you're listening to The Happiness Agenda. And I don't want to seem excited today, but I'll tell you what, if you're looking for happiness, I've got somebody phenomenally good coming right up. Now, when I say coming right up, I guess I get to choose and how long that will be, right? I could keep her off here, sitting in the sideline, sitting here in the back ways for a long time. But I think I'll bring her on right now because she's an happiness expert. Would you like to be happier? Well, I hope so, because you're going to learn how to be happier today. Stephanie Harrison is right here with me. Hiya, Stephanie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And so tell me about you. I mean, I know I do the happiness agenda and I always try and be that guy. But from everything I've read about you, you're that lady.
Oh, that's really nice. I'm not sure, but I'll do my best.
So tell me about you. How did you, what have you been doing? And then how did you get into happiness and what's driving you?
Yeah, of course. So I am the founder of a company called The New Happy, which is devoted to helping people to be happier, which is a purpose that I'm really excited about and find very meaningful. And really, that for me started when I pursued a master's degree in positive psychology about 6 years ago. And while I was in school, discovered some really interesting research about the things that do make us happy, the things that don't make us happy, and the misconceptions that we have about those things. So
Wait,
that's what really led
we
me.
have misconceptions about happiness?
I think we have a lot of misconceptions about happiness.
Like happiness and love. I always tell people, I said,
Yeah,
love is not enough, and people go, what do you mean love makes the world go round? I go, no, that's what they tell you, but there's a lot of things you got to learn. Love
it's a
needs to be
little
learned.
bit.
Happiness needs to be learned, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit more complicated than most of us have been taught, where we just think that if you do all the right things, then you'll be happy, right? But it doesn't really work that way.
No, it doesn't. And that's so tell us more about it because this is going to be your 25 minutes that we got going here. Tell us about when you say it doesn't just happen that way. I mean, we talk about how people should wake up in a good mood, or if they're not in a good mood, I teach people how to get in a good mood in about 35
Mm,
seconds. And it's only if they have it in their head that they want to be in a good mood, right? That's
mm,
the driving force. So tell me
mm.
about what you learned about happiness.
I think for me, the really most important learning has been thinking very broadly about your life and the goals that you're setting for yourself. So I love that you're helping people in those micro moments because that really matters. And then also thinking, zooming out, what are the things that we need in our lives to feel like not only we were living happy lives, but that our lives were well spent and that we were doing something that was worthy and meaningful. And for me, where the research has led me is that life is really about being of service to others and finding ways to help them in the unique ways that you can, using your gifts and your strengths and all of your capabilities, the things that you've learned, and all of the wonderful things that make you you and the person that you are. So, finding that intersection between what you have to offer and how others might need that help and support is, to my mind, the recipe for lasting happiness.
That's a really good point is that when we talk about happiness, people think it just happens. I mean, I'll be
Mm,
happy, and we've heard this before. When I get the house I've dreamed of, I'll be happy. When I get the kids
yeah.
when I find the partner that I've always dreamed of, I'll be happy.
Mm,
When I get the next ice cream cone, I'll be happy. Well, I have to admit, ice cream cones do make me happy. So there's something there. But, that's one of our greatest challenges, isn't it? Is that
yeah, it
we
is.
struggle with things are supposed to be Disney said, "Hey, here's happiness." La di da. They put out the girl who sings all those songs, and hey, there's happiness. But it doesn't happen. What happens if you have bad things happen to you? How do you remain happy?
Yeah, exactly. Those are the questions that I think we need to pay more attention to because the reality is that life is difficult and full of challenging experiences. And if we're relying on these external forms of gratification to make us happy, then that's really ultimately something that's very unstable. And ultimately, as the research tells us, it doesn't really work. We just revert back to our baseline level of happiness. So, what I've always been interested in is what is a different way to think about happiness? What would it look like if we were cultivating and creating these lives that were grounded in something more sustainable, more meaningful, and more generative for the greater population?
And that's so you've got is it a group? Is it a company called the New Happy? What
Yeah,
does
it,
that mean? A company?
it's a
I formed a company called the New Happy, and everybody just danced around for about an hour, and then we quit.
Yeah, it's a company that is devoted to helping people to embody this new type of happiness, and so we do that in a number of different ways through artwork, through a podcast, through our website, through a book that I'm currently working on, a newsletter that comes out every week. So all sorts of channels trying to meet people where they are to help them in the moment to reconsider their definition of happiness and give them the tools that they need using the latest research.
What I find fascinating is my father passed away about 5 years ago, I guess,
Mm,
and my mom's still alive today. But it was really interesting that my mom and dad were in an assisted living place, and then when he got something happened and he really went downhill, and then we
mm,
put him into a nursing home, and he was there for about 2 years before he passed away. And what was interesting when we went to pick up his stuff, right?
yeah.
The staff greeted us with his stuff and said, "We're really going to miss RC." And I went, "Really?" And they went, "Yeah, we're gonna miss his singing and his harmonica playing." And I went, "What?" Right? Because I hadn't heard my dad sing since I was and he passed away when
Oh,
I'm in my 60s, so I hadn't heard him sing for 40 years. I hadn't
wow.
heard him play his harmonica for 40 years, and it was like, wait, he went to the nursing home and started to play his harmonica and sing, and the people there obviously appreciated. And then just last week, my brother-in-law sent me something because my mother went to the nursing home. She had a fall, and
Mm,
about a year and a half ago, she went to the nursing home, and he
mm,
sent me um, a post. He said, "Hey, look at the artwork done by my mother-in-law," which was my mother. And it says done by Dorothy Sapato, age 96, and she won an award and she sold it at an auction for $2,700. A piece of artwork.
wow, that's
And and
amazing.
everybody, all my my nieces and stuff are writing to me going, "Nobody told me that, grandma could paint." And I went, "Who- I didn't know she could paint." Right? So I think when I that really brought me to my both my mom and my dad. Who knows why, but when they found some happiness
Yeah,
at the end of their lives, it was doing something that maybe somebody had said, either you can't do it, you're not good enough,
yeah,
or please don't do that. Because I have to admit, in
mhm,
my second marriage, I'm in my third. And in my second marriage, when I started to drag out my guitars, my wife would holler down into the basement where I was practicing, say, "Don't you
mhm,
have something better to do?" And so I'd put my guitar away rather than argue about it.
right.
But that's what my mom and dad seem to have spoken to me, which is, don't wait till you're 95,
Yeah,
right?
oh my gosh, what an incredible story. I'm so grateful that you shared that with me. I mean, I think it's so true, like, so many of our purest, most joyful impulses are things that are often suppressed because they're not valued in the moment, or because we get some negative feedback, or because something goes wrong. And I think also our culture is really obsessed with people being perfect and doing an amazing job, and if you can't do it perfectly, then you're not supposed to bother, even if it's something like what your parents did that brings them profound joy and that also seems to help other people experience joy. To me, that's what it's all about.
And that's I wish we could teach and we can teach that. I think maybe that's the key. We talk
Yeah.
about, and I've been preaching our education system for 30 years. Harry
Mm,
Chapin did a song 30, 40 years ago that was Roses Are Red, I think, and it was all about his little son had been told something, so he created this song out of it. But it was the little kid started to paint flowers different colors and leaves different color. And the
uh,
teacher said, "No, roses are red, flowers are green, and that's the way it's always been." Right. And then
yeah,
he finally falls into line and he goes to a new school. And when he learns, they have art class, and he paints roses are red and flowers, the
yeah.
leaves are green. And the teacher said, "Why don't you paint other colors?" And he went, "No, no, this is
Mm,
what it's supposed to be." Right. We'd
right.
indoctrinated this little kid into that. And I think that's where so many of us come is um, we've been taught through our education system to follow the rules, stay within the
Mhm,
box, keep the guidelines, right? So you can go out and get a job when you grow up, but we don't teach
exactly.
it so that children can learn. They say, "What's
Yeah.
ADD?" I said, "ADD to me is when we haven't taught the children in a manner in which they want to learn." So
Right.
I
Well,
don't know.
everyone is a totally unique individual who ultimately deserves, like, that tailored support, but obviously that's not something that's being provided.
No, that's right. And
Yeah.
it can't be all the time, but that's our education system could certainly help us learn how to deal with challenges, how to deal with
Yes.
disappointment, as opposed to giving everybody an award. We should teach them how to
Mm,
deal with the not getting an award because
mhm.
99% of us never get awards. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, if we would teach that, we could teach ourselves to be happy. Can we?
Yeah, I it's we can teach ourselves to be happy. I mean, I prefer to think of Part of the difficulty of this conversation in general that we have about happiness in society is that when we say happiness, we're often talking about totally different things. So there's happiness in the moment, like when you eat your ice cream, right? Like that's a form of happiness that's probably
Yes, it
more
is.
closely related closely related to pleasure or to a simple joy or to, like enjoying a sensation, like a bodily sensation, something like that. And then there's the type of happiness that comes when you have a child or when you are work really hard towards something or you are there to support somebody else. That's an entirely different form of happiness and well-being. And really, I think if we can help people to recognize that the first type is great, it's very important, and it was what makes for a fun and enjoyable and joyful life. And then the second type is the type that we can learn how to embody. It's more like a skill than anything else.
So how do we learn that skill? I mean, you obviously with the new happy corporation company, you're trying to teach everybody. So first of all, let's pause right here a second. And how do people get in touch with you? How would they learn more about you?
Well, you can find us at our website, which is thenewhappy.com, or on social media at New Happy Co. I would love to hear from anyone and connect.
Cool. All right. And
Yeah.
so yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in terms of skills, I think there's so many different ways to think about this. I think one of the key skills that is most associated with happiness in the long term is learning how to be more compassionate towards yourself and compassionate towards others. Just to kind of going back to what we said about life can be difficult. Compassion is just about being there in response to somebody else's pain and wanting to make a difference and wanting to make it a little bit better. And when we learn how to do that for ourselves and for others, studies have found that we experience a profound benefit to our own personal well being. And we're able to also make the world a kinder, more caring place at the same time. So, this is ultimately a win win from my perspective. If we can learn to be just a little bit nicer to ourselves, a little bit nicer to others, we are able to create this ripple effect, which is really beautiful. And there's a really simple way to learn how to be more compassionate towards yourself. And really, it's just about noticing when you're in pain or experiencing something hard or difficult, when you are struggling, when you're going through a hard time, and then asking yourself what you need in that moment, and then finding a way to help yourself to have it. That is really one of the things that can have a profound impact on you, and it only takes a minute or two to take that time to check in on yourself.
That's a really good point. I mean, I teach relationship work, so I love
Mm,
doing my workshops on love and romance. But most of those come back to exactly what you're talking about here, which is the ability to be compassionate to other people.
mm,
I'll get into it, especially if I get enough men. Men don't want to come to a love and relationship, workshop. But when I get them, when I can get couples in, we talk about stuff, and I get pretty hardcore with them sometimes because I'll say,
mm,
think about the last thing you argued about. What was it? And then we think, what's worth arguing about? What could be the last straw that breaks the camel's back that says, I quit this relationship. I'm never
mm,
going to deal with you again. And
yeah,
all those things are about compassion, which is
mm,
what do you expect and what do you hope for? And I had a
mm,
friend who I thought they did a great job. He ended up divorcing his wife, but for when I heard it, I thought it was great, which is they don't argue about the shoulds.
mm,
Steve should have taken out the garbage, but if Steve doesn't
right,
take out the garbage, then my wife's name is Kristen, and Kristen will get up and take out the garbage. Not because Steve was a jerk and didn't take out the garbage, but because if Steve should have, then Kristen still can. So if I
mm,
say she should rub my back, right? If she doesn't rub my
mm.
back, then hire a masseuse, right? That's not something she wants to do or is willing to do at that point in time. And
Yeah,
that's the compassionate side of what we do. What's the last thing you argued about?
mm,
And I mean argued about. I don't mean, hey, we had a discussion. What's the
yeah,
last thing you really argued about? Some people get into screaming matches about you didn't take out the garbage, and they do.
yeah,
And I'm like, how can that be, right? How can it be that?
mm,
Because it's a matter of trust.
yeah.
They broke the
So
trust of you're going to take
yeah.
out the garbage.
Totally, it's about something totally deeper than the garbage, right?
Yeah,
Like, it's
yeah.
about how are you showing up for me when things are hard or when there's pain here or when I want something and don't know how to articulate it. All of those things that run so deeply for us being human. And of course, in our relationships, it's really easy to get upset and to feel all of those difficult emotions about that.
Yeah, and when you talked about, you said a simple way to be compassionate to yourself is
Mm,
recognize that you need it first and recognize
yeah,
what'll help. And so that's true of people around you. If you can recognize, right, that somebody needs your compassion, they need
yeah,
more help from you. And maybe sometimes you don't have to point it out to them, just try and give them what they need, and maybe they'll
yeah.
recognize it themselves, right?
Right, exactly, and that's one of the greatest things that we can do for somebody is to attend to their needs in that way, and if, as you said, if we can't do it, finding a way to help them to get that in some other way, or, outsourcing it or helping them through the capacity that we have, but when we are able to check in and be there for the people in our lives, it's associated with profound improvements in our own personal well-being, it's found like hundreds of studies have found the benefits of giving and supporting other people, whether they're the closest people in your life, like your family members, or they're complete strangers. And I think that people know this and they recognize that people want to help and they want to be of service to people. And part of what I'm really passionate and excited about is letting them know that actually this is probably the best way to pursue your own happiness is to look for ways to help those around you.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting.
Mm.
Uh, go back 30 years. I did a seminar for a group of volunteers,
Mm.
and I always try and make my talks fun, entertaining. And so one of the things I told them was, first of all, I said, "You're all volunteers here. You're all help all kinds of people," and they're like, "Yeah." And I go, "I hate you." I said, "You make the world rough on the rest of us because they expect that kind of behavior from people like me." And I said, "I'm not a giver." So,
Mm,
it's that type of thing where we do have to recognize our own limitations.
of
But if you
course.
find some people who aren't happy, how do I help them discover their happiness? How would that
Mm,
happen? I mean, I could
I
send them to you. Obviously, that's what I'll do now, right?
Oh, that's kind. I think that, there's a lot of different sources of unhappiness, right? As you said, you do have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And so if you're struggling with mental health challenges or with a really difficult time in your life, then it is appropriate and important to make sure that you're doing what you need for yourself to build yourself back up and gather your strength and to make sure that you can eventually be there and support other people in the way that you want to. So that's kind of step one, I would say, in terms of making sure that you're in a good enough position to do that. But really, I think that part of what we think of when we think of helping people is what you're describing is you have to go out and volunteer and engage in some long-term program or something like that. And again, those people are amazing. They are wonderful
Oh yeah.
heroes who help our world to be so much better. But there are other ways of helping people too. And so if that's not something that resonates with you or not something that you have the capacity to do at that moment in your life, there are tons of other ways that you can start to help people. And I think what I really try to encourage people is to find something to do today. So, as simple as buying somebody a coffee or having a conversation with somebody that you meet when you're out and about running your errands, offering proactively to do something for somebody that you love, helping a coworker or a colleague, calling and checking in on somebody who you know is going through something really hard. These are the small actions that actually add up and create a healthier, happier world. And the more of us do that and the more of us care for and tend to one another, the better our world is going to be and the greater happiness we're going to experience.
That's really a good point. I'm going to give another real world example. I went to a
Yes.
breakfast this morning, and there were going to be 60 people at this breakfast, but when I walked in, there were probably only about 14 or 15. And
Mm,
one lady, and it's a retirement village, so one lady was over here setting up these, little card tables, and she's setting up her card table. I could see from as I walked across the room that she was, pulling the one leg up, and I walked over and she's setting it up, so putting stuff on the top on. And I said to her, I said, "Do you need any help on this?" And she said, "No, no, I got this." And I said, "So you don't have anything else?" She said, "Well, I'm going to get another table." And I went, "I'll grab that table for you." She went, "No, no, no, don't worry about it. I've got it." I went, "I'll get
mm,
that table for you." And it's just a card table,
mm.
so you just fold the legs out. But as
Yeah,
I'm putting that card table up, there were two things that happened. First of all, she was profusely thankful. But as
yeah.
I'm looking at the other 12 or 13 people who were there, who were just sitting there or standing there talking, shooting the poo, right? It's like, why didn't they come over and offer to help? And
Mm,
that's the kind of thing that changes people. To be
mm.
aware that other
Yeah.
people, I always go back to, if you were the one setting up three card tables,
Mhm.
right? would you like people to come over and help you? Even if you really didn't need the help, would it make you feel better? And the answer is
Yeah,
almost always yes. So why didn't
yeah,
the other 13? And they'll always go, "Oh, I didn't even notice." And so that gets back to what you said. You have to develop an awareness for what
yeah.
other people need and want, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like your radar, your helping radar, right? Like keeping your eyes open for those opportunities where you can help and make a difference. And there's so many things that get in the way of that, right? Like again, thinking that, oh, they seem fine and that's like not my business and not my problem, those messages in our heads. Or
Yeah.
maybe you think like, oh, well, like I'm busy right now doing something. And like not saying that any of those are illegitimate, but when you have a helping radar, like you demonstrated in that moment, you're looking for those moments where you're like, somebody needs help here, and I'm going to be the one to do it. And I think that really ties back to this important component of happiness, which is responsibility. Viewing yourself as responsible for the well being of your community and for the people around you, again, is associated with greater levels of well being because we are really ultimately we're made to help each other biologically and psychologically. Everything points us towards that, and so when we behave in that way, we're rewarded with the feeling of happiness, and we're also creating this positive ripple effect. I'm sure that woman was totally touched and went home to her family and told them about you, like that's a wonderful thing that you did for her.
At least she probably didn't go back and shoot them all, right? That's the fact that when you said something earlier, I was thinking, "Hey, look at all the Karens that we see." And I say, "Look at all the Karens we see in the world." But the answer is,
Mm,
I was just talking to another lady this morning, and she was talking about, and I'm trying to remember what we were referring to, but she was like, "Oh, she didn't want to go to New York City because of all the high crime." And I went, "You've been
mm,
watching too much TV." Too
yeah.
much TV, because all the news tells you is the bad stuff. All
Yeah.
Facebook people showing you the Karens of the world, all right, the Carls of the world,
Mm,
whoever the bad guys might be, are showing you the bad things. Hardly, it's not even 50-50 of the good things or the good people.
yeah,
And so we see so much of the bad. But this lady said, "I don't want to go to New York because of all the crime." I said, "I spent all of 2019 in New York City, wandering the whole city by myself and
yeah,
never once saw any crime." And I think because we listen to the negative, it
mm,
really affects us, it impacts us, and it drags us down that rabbit hole, don't you?
mm. Yeah, it's true. I mean, biologically, our brains are wired to attune to the negative. They want to pay more attention to it. So anything that is a threat is going to suck us in and make it feel really hard to turn away from it, right? That's part of how our brains work. And one of the things that is an element of these happiness skills is learning to retrain our brains to look for the good and for the hopeful and for the beautiful and for all of these little things that are happening, because to your point, there are so many more acts of goodness and kindness happening in the world than we could ever possibly imagine,
Yeah.
and no one talks about them. They're part of the norm,
Well,
and we just get
they'd
used
be
to them.
boring though too. They'd
Yeah.
be boring. I mean, we don't watch basketball because everybody makes all their shots. We watch it because somebody's going to get in a fight, somebody's going to trip somebody, somebody's going to fall down. That's what,
Yeah.
like you said, that's what humans are geared to do. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
that's for us. A lot of it is entertainment, but it is also a matter of gearing ourselves and learning that, hey,
Mm.
20% of what we pay attention to is negative if you really pay
Yeah.
attention, right? If you drive by an accident, you don't have to look. We call it the looky-loos, the gawkers, whatever you want to call
Oh,
them,
yeah.
that slow
Right.
down all the traffic, but they want to see the bad news. Let me see the bad news. And you're like, quit it. You're going to crash into somebody in front of you while you're
Yeah.
looking for the bad news. And I'm always, what difference will it make? So you see four bodies on the road or you see a car all mangled. Will that change your life today or tomorrow? And the answer is
Mhm.
absolutely not.
Mm.
Always wanna say, if you wanna drive by and say, "Wow, there's a big accident. Thank God it wasn't
Yeah.
us, and I pray for the people who might have been involved." It's
Right.
it's what we want to do is we lose focus on our real lives to pay attention to some
Mm.
of the other things. Before we, get, the last couple minutes, again, tell us how to get in touch with you, and do you have some programs on your website that they might, decide to join?
Yeah, we offer all of our content for free right now, and so it's accessible for anyone who's
Wait,
interested.
I think she blew by that too fast. I think she said free. Did you say free?
Yes, that's true.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so one of the missions of our company is to make this information accessible to anyone who wants it. And so there's a ton of content that we've put out that's out there. You can get it at our website, thenewhappy.com, or on social media at New Happy Co. on any of the platforms.
Cool. Thenewhappy.com. If
Yeah.
you haven't got there yet, somebody's knocking on my door. I told you I had to 4:30, right? If thenewhappy.com is what you have to count on being there. If you haven't
Mm,
gone there yet, pause this podcast, quit the podcast, go there, because here's what I want. I want you to be happy. I want you to enjoy the happiness that life has to
mm,
offer to you. That is the key for all of us, as we're this whole mess of the United States is
mm,
happening now, and what we have to do is band together and find a way to create a new happy. Wouldn't that be
mm.
great to create a world where people were happy and you go in and people were happy to see you? Wow, how cool would that be? So join Stephanie at thenewhappy.com. That's the way to go. And Stephanie, a couple words of wisdom as we close this episode out.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to have met you and for your wonderful enthusiasm and stories. It's lovely.
Thank you.
No words of wisdom, just to ask for everyone to practice compassion for themselves and others, and to watch as it affects your life and pay attention to those changes that you see. If you like them, if it works for you, then that would be fantastic. And if not, there's a ton of other strategies out there. So just have hope and know that happiness is possible for you.
Happiness is possible. And my last words are, go be happy. Tired of you being grumpy, right? But go to Stephanie's thenewhappy.com. You've been listening to The Happiness Agenda. I'm your host, Steve Sapato. You can reach me at steve@stevesapato.com. And I look forward to hearing from you as you create your own happiness and your own world where you help people change their lives. Thanks a lot, Stephanie, for being on. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. God bless.
Yeah.